Food. Food. Yummy. Yummy.
Hi, I'm Andy. This is Menu from Mars, Season 2. What we're going to start with today is a butcher show. This is going to be my first show of the season. And we are going to butcher up a pork loin. And I'm going to show you how to make a couple roasts out of this, and then how I cut my center cut loin pork chops that I slice, and I do the jalapeno pepper and onion, sweet onion now, pork chops. And we're going to cut up a steak cap. I was going to do a roast as well, but believe it or not, on the back end of the steak cap is a roast. This will actually get cut into 3 different sections. You'll have your first cut, which will come down this way, and then you'll have the centerpiece, which is usually all I get, but I happen to find a whole one this time. And then you cut your steaks from here, and on the back end, the hard end back over here, you would cut your roast. I'm going to make it chili meat, but you can make a roast out of this the same as the roasts for the most part that I get, or that you can pick up at the grocery store. I do have a roast downstairs, so if I get to the end and things are a little askew, or it doesn't look a lot like the roasts that I normally do, I'll run downstairs and grab that, because I've had a couple of requests to butcher that. My dogs are working their way in here because they know I'm going to be cutting up meat, and they want some. So what I'll do is I'll run down and grab that, because I know that a couple of people have asked for that, and I want to make sure that I get that right. So we are going to start with the pork loin. This bad boy is going to have to wait. Just in case you're wondering, this is 25 pounds. You can go into almost any grocery store, and the way you want to ask for that, they have a top and a bottom. This is a bottom. I'm sorry, this is a top. Top and a bottom. You want to go in and you want to ask for a vacuum pack of top round beef, or bottom round, whatever you want to be, whether you want to be the top or the bottom. So I just go in, I say, look, I need a top round. I want the whole cap. Give it to me cryo, and they do. Most stores like BJ's, Sam's, Costco, those warehouse stores will have these already out in a fridge case somewhere, and you can just grab one. They come much smaller. You can pick these up for like $30, $35, and just get the steaks and a little bit of chili meat. I grabbed this one. This one was about $3 a pound and cost me $75. It's a lot of money, especially nowadays. But we'll get the first cut steaks. We'll get a bunch of other steaks that technically, I mean, look at how big this thing is. We'll be able to cut them in half and sit down and eat those as 2 separate steaks. And we'll probably get, I'm going to take a guesstimate and say that we're going to get 12 to 15 steaks out of that, plus chili meat and or 2 roasts. However, depending on when I get to the end, we'll be able to tell if we're going to be able to get roasts out of it, or if we should keep cutting steak, although the meat gets a little tough, or what have you. But we'll get to that. This is a big one. I buy these by the case. They're pork loins, and they're cheap, man. They're like under $2 a pound. Not as cheap as chicken, but this is a much better cut than chicken. So what we have here is a failure to... No, what we have here, this is a thick one. They're not usually this thick. Some of them, I have one downstairs that's almost twice this size. And a bunch of the rest that I got in the case are just a little thinner than this one. But this was a good size one to start with. So we're going to start with this one. And What you have here is, this is just great. I am going to cut 2 roasts off of this, and through the middle I'm going to get my pork loin chops. Normally this is thinner and a little bit longer, so you get more chops and you get longer roasts. We're gonna get a couple of smaller roasts out of this, which is okay. I'm gonna show you how to cook them in a subsequent episode, because high heat, short duration. Oh, I thought it was gonna fall. In the oven, 500 degrees, just like before. They come out perfect. And on this side, you have a couple of different sides here. It's hard for you to tell from there, but you have this nice grain of fat that comes down. It kind of tails off at the bottom and rounds out. So you have this really dark meat here and this light meat over here, and then another strip of really dark meat here. And comparatively dark meat on pork. Not really dark, but this will be a roast down here, and this is what I like to call white meat roast. It's your normal everyday pork roast, and if it's not cooked correctly, it will sop all of the moisture out of your body. Your lips will crack, your eyes will dry out, and you'll have to crawl across the house to find some sort of hydration. Because people incinerate the crap out of this, and they don't need to. Down this end, though, this is, when cooked right, when you get to the second half of this roast, it'll taste like beef. It'll actually taste like prime rib. It's almost the same cut of meat. So I need to cut this open and drain all of the protein out of it. Everybody likes to call it blood. It's not blood. It's just liquid protein, which I guess is blood. And I got to set up my cutting boards, and I will be back with you in a moment. All right, we're back. And when I say we, I mean me. We're going to hack this up. We drained it. We took the cryo pack off it. This is kind of something that you'll get the feeling for the more you do. Now this is obviously way bigger than my cutting board here, so you're going to get pork all over the place. The same thing's going to happen with the beef. But as I mentioned before, you're going to have a white meat portion, and you're going to have what I call the prime rib portion. And the reason I call it that is, if you cook it correctly and you cut the pieces off it, it has that fat that kind of runs in a circle around it and has the darker meat on the outside and the lighter meat on the inside. Both reddish meats, both look like prime rib, and it tastes just like it. And it's 10 times cheaper. If I served this to you after I cook it, there'd be no way that you would know if it were pork or beef. I'm just saying, you go ahead and waste your money. These are tough times. I'm on a fixed income. So you got to do this more by feel than anything else. I like to look at it, and you can almost tell kind of where it comes down and where it's going. I'm going to go to about here, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut the roast off the front end. And you'll notice I'm wearing gloves. I have cuts on my hands, so I don't want to get parasites and pork juice mixed with my blood. He's a germaphobe. You learn something new every day. People who know me, though, already knew that. So we have this grain of fat that kind of comes up and does this little twisty thing. And if you can't see it, but where it comes down and just kind of levels out and moves that way, you can almost see a difference in the color of the meat. And it's really dark here, it starts to lighten up here, and then here's kind of where it turns into white meat. Your normal pork meat. So I normally just do this, put my hand down, and then cut there, which is almost exactly where that fat kind of comes down and changes direction and goes that way. they're all just little tricks. Everybody has their own. This is how I do it. I eyeball it. Where it comes down, where it changes direction is where I cut. It's also, the reason I'm saying this, giving you 3 different ways so you can pick, choose your own adventure. You can do the hand thing and cut it. I don't spread my hand like this. I just kind of place it on it like this. You know, the blade of a knife of this one, this type of knife works as well. It's all almost the same thing. It's about 6 inches, maybe a little longer. So I actually do it by where the meat changes color and where the fat comes down and changes direction. So you just come in and you hack that baby off. Now, it as you get further down, it becomes more dominant. As you go down here, this part will start to get thicker and thicker, and it'll actually come from here and come all the way around like that, which will look just like prime rib. So you take this, you can trim off all the little fat. I like to cook it with the fat, so there's one roast. I'm not going to cut the other roast yet. I am going to cut some chops first, because if you cut off this roast first and you can do it that way, but when you start cutting chops, you're either going to get one that's way too thick or way too thin. So I cut my chops all the way down, and then wherever it ends is where I do that. You also have here, you're not going to be able to see it because I can't pick this up and carry it over there, and I can't touch the camera now because I'm the only one here. I don't have a camera person, and I got crap all over my hands. When you come down here, you're going to see now this grain of fat kind of spreads out right here. All right, this is normally where I would cut, between where this piece of fat comes up and kind of starts to run over the loin. And then there's also another piece of meat, a darker one, that comes up and kind of comes to a point. I used to use this. The problem is when you get the thinner ones and the thinner and longer ones, I'm going to get so much email from this episode, that it doesn't have this piece. So you can't always go by that. But it is one way to do it. The other one is here. You should be able to come all the way down to about here or here, because this can be short and fat. It doesn't have to be any specific place on here. The further you get down here, the drier your chops are going to get. They're going to be moister down this end. They're going to be drier down this end. So you don't want to go too far. This will be a huge roast down at this end. I normally cook them at the same time. I'm probably going to end up cooking these separately. Now, you'll notice too, I got the fat cap facing down. That's not just so that I can do the grains of fat and try to figure it out that way. It's because it cuts easier like this. When you're trying to cut through that hard, tough fat cap, you're squishing your meat. Don't squish your meat, man. I'm going to hell. So you just start cutting chops. I'm cutting them a little thicker now. God. And so I'm doing about 1 inch. All right, so here we go. These are about the size of the chops that I cut. More than a digit. Big, thick, round. And what I'll do is I'll end up freezing these and we'll cook them at another time. But before I put them away, I'm going to come back and cut in. I'm not going to show you that because you've seen me do it in a past episode. But I do it now before I freeze them. And then that way when I thaw them out and I cut up my vegetables and cook them in the skillet, they're pre-cut. I don't have to worry about any of that. So, 1. 2. 3. 3 beautiful. No, I don't want copyright infringement. According to some of our politicians, Sesame Street needs to make its own money. They don't need to make it suing me. So 4. I'm not going to get a whole lot of chops out of this. If I cut them 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, and you're welcome to do it, this will go a lot further. You'll get a lot more chops, almost 2 times as many. I wasn't thinking of that. I was trying not to say something that I was thinking. It's tough sometimes. Trying to keep this as PG, or at least PG-13 as I can. All right, so we're getting down into the area that you want to be cognizant of what you're doing. I'm still going to go to about here, but just be aware that our time is coming to an end. And what these do is we make nice thick pork chops now. But that's a luxury. If you're buying the pork as a loin and cutting it yourself, you're usually doing that to save money, which is why I do it. Plus, I like to determine, the length of my meat, the thickness of my chops, the length of my roasts. So I like to cut it myself. It's a pain in the butt sometimes. You think, I gotta go and cut that. I thawed it out. I gotta go get it. But I buy it by the case, and then I freeze the others that came in the case. I just take one, I do it, I thaw one out, I do it, and we go like this. All right, we're getting close here to where we're going to start getting really dry chops. And the funny thing is, you end up with really dry pork chops, but if you leave it in a roast, you can make it moist. It's very easy to do it that way. Now, I'm past the point at which the fat has kind of moved and starts to come up the back end of that roast. This was, like I said, a fairly big, thick loin, so this is not normally the size of the roast I have. It's usually about this big. This is bigger just because the loin is bigger. I want to show you something else too. As you're cutting down the loin, you have this little tiny bit over here, and that's consistent, through all of the chops. It's just this little piece with a little tiny dab of meat in the middle. You don't really eat that. When you start getting into the area where you need to stop, you'll notice it gets bigger. On this side of the loin chop, it's small, it's little, it's this area. When you flip it over, it's a much bigger area now. This is when you need to start thinking about stopping. You might be able to get one more out of it, but you should probably stop here. You don't have to, especially if you've got a roast this big. I'm going to cut one more off here. And I'm going to show you how you know you're getting too far. All right, so this one matches up with the backside of our other one. I said it's starting to get too. You flip it over, and that piece of meat is turning into a medallion. So you need to stop that. We've gone too far. Not to mention, look at the front of this. You're running out of an area to get the knife in and cut because you're cut off by this grain of fat and this grain of fat. So normally these aren't here. You just stick the knife in and cut in the middle to stuff. This one is going to be a lot tougher. I'm going to have to kind of go in at an angle and swing the blade like this instead of cutting across, which makes it more difficult. Also, it's just another signal that it might be time to stop and make this a roast. So here's the roast. I'm gonna bring it over and show you too. This is the roast. It doesn't look very wide because it's not. I should have stopped back over here. One side, the other. This whole thing is a roast. This is a roast. So you'll see, look how dark the meat is. I mean, you'd never know this isn't beef when it's cooked correctly. But that's the difference in the meats. So, I mean, even the centerpiece, you can see the difference. So, and I'm saying so a lot. That's that. You've got 2 roasts here. I will freeze these together and cook them because we're on a diet here. I wanted to drop about 3 tons. So we'll cook these together. And if you do work out, if you are on a high protein diet, which most of you shouldn't be, but if you are, you can cook these together and they'll keep, and you can finish them off over the course of a week, cutting nice 4 to 6 ounce to 8 ounce pieces off of it. Same on both sides. You cut 4 off of each one, 3 off of each one, and eat them together. I cook them, I toss them in a Ziploc and throw them in the fridge. And then I just cut pieces off every day. A little bit of salsa, 15 calories per tablespoon. And that's what I eat this with. A little bit of brown rice and a vegetable. That's when I'm on diet. When I'm off diet, I cook them separately. And this will be dinner one night and then leftovers for a couple days. And then this will be cooked correctly on its own. And like I said, it's like prime rib. So it's soft, it's delicate, it's very tender, and it tastes just like beef once you get about, on this one it would be about 1/3 of the way down. From here out is going to taste just like prime rib. That's that. That's the pork loin. I don't cut any fat off it. Keep the fat on. I'm going to cut these chops. I'm going to bag these and freeze them. And then I'm going to clean up, set up the other cutting board. I'm going to drain. While I'm doing that, I'm going to take the vacuum pack and I'm going to cut along the bottom here and then poke a hole in the top and let it drain into the sink, because you want to get all that protein out, because when we bring this over, it's going to be mammoth. So I'm going to take this off so I don't contaminate my camera. I'll be back about a half hour, but it'll be instantaneous for you. Okay, boys and girls, here's the big one. Now, I'm going to come get the camera in a second because I want to show you something. I grabbed a roast because I'm fairly certain that the roast that I'm going to get off the back end of this is going to be different than the way the cut of beef that this comes from. And although I cook this and eat it the same way, I figured I'd grab the fattiest roast I could find to trim it down and show you. Now, this thing is horrific. It's huge. 25 pounds of meat. Probably closer to 22 and 3 pounds of fat. There are some people and some schools of thought that say you trim the fat off and off the backside. Now, I don't prescribe to that. I like to trim my meat after I've cut it. Touch my nose. It's okay, I'm gonna wear gloves. New cutting board. Wash my knife. Wash my table. New plates. New pair of gloves. Everything. Everything's new for this. I don't want to cross-contaminate pork and beef. So you shouldn't probably want to either. Let me come get the camera. I want to show you something. Okay, now, just because you see this and that doesn't look good, I mean, compared to the beef, that looks horrific. You can tell the difference. So just because this particular cut has impetigo, it doesn't mean you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're going to be coming down off of this end this way, at an angle. When we get to here, this is supposed to be our roast. I really think the roast is here. You do your first cut and you go down along here. But there are different ways to start this. With the smaller ones that I normally get, there's a hard side and a soft side. And the reason they call it that is because if you squeeze it like you do Charmin, there'll be a very soft side and there'll be a very hard side. You want to cut from the soft side to the hard side because that's the way the grain of the meat flows. I'll make this up. So, new gloves. That doesn't make you want to get with me. All right, so new gloves, and we're gonna start with our first cut. Just so you know, I sharpened my knife beforehand. I sharpen it every time beforehand when I'm butchering meat. A sharp knife will make this so much easier. Now, unlike the pork loin, we are going to cut this fat cap side up. Now, the reason for that is that the beef fat here is a lot softer than the pork fat on the loin. It's also a much bigger cut of meat, so you're less likely to squish it down and have wedges. Although it still can happen. Part of the solution is a knife. The other part is kind of squeezing it as you go, and I'll show you that. You want to squeeze your meat. But what the fat cap provides on this that it doesn't on the loin is that when you choose how thick you're going to make your steaks, this one will help you keep to that level. Now this is huge. This is just an enormous cap. This is probably the biggest one I've ever tried to cut. And I like to do things like that when I'm doing this show. I like to do things for the first time because I'll run into the same problems you'll run into. This is a huge cut of meat, all right? I usually deal with something about half this size. Don't be intimidated by this. This is, listen, the guys that cut this at the store are no different than you and me. They just know where to start. They have an idea of what they're doing. In fact, when I was there talking to the guy who sold me this, he spun this thing about 3 times before figuring out which way he would cut it. A little different than I would. But when he said that, it made me realize that these guys sometimes, not the head meat cutters, but the people that just work there, they don't know any better than you or I. They've just been shown how to do it, and if they haven't done it a lot, sometimes it takes them a little while. Don't be intimidated. If you are, go pick up one of the smaller ones and start there. Go soft side to hard side. Simple. But like I said, I like to do things for the first time here so that I can run into the same problems you're having. If you have problems. If I have problems. And I've got problems. So I'm going to start cutting this, and I'm going to trim. I'm going to start up here. This is a very short, just compact area. And if you feel the underside of this, all right, there, as you get down here, this is the hard side, all right? This is the soft side. So we're going to come in at an angle to here. Now this isn't going to give me a very good roast through here. It would almost be better if the roast were this way, which is probably exactly how I would do it if it shows almost the exact same cut that you would get otherwise for a cap, and you would work your way down, and then this would be the side that you wouldn't do anything with. But I am going to just give her a whirl. I'm going to trust that the gentleman who told me, because first cuts I've probably only done twice, so I'm going to trust what he said. And like I said, normally I would probably, if I were going to do this, I would cut here and then work this way and then take my steaks off of there and go down. But you know, first cut, the very first cut is always waste, just so you know. Not for me. I have dogs. I'm cutting chili meat. I'm going to keep this. That's going to be my, not my waste plate, but my chili meat plate. And we have a nice grain in the meat here, so this is where we want to be. Now, first cut steaks aren't very thick. They can be if you want them to be, but I'm going to go ahead, and this is it. This is all you're doing, and it's going to take you a little while to cut something that's 25 pounds. But there's one first cut steak. It's pretty big for a first cut. Now you can see here that the fat is going to start separating. You may not be able to see it, but the fat is going to start working its way down, and eventually we'll have a grain of fat that goes right along the side of this, but there'll be meat on the other side of it. And the thicker that gets is what's going to tell you when it's time to stop. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut these probably 3/4 of an inch. And this is it. I just go straight across like this. And that's it. There is also, I probably should have flipped this over and showed you, there's also fat on the bottom side. And that's gonna make it tough to just make a clean cut. And this is what I was talking about. You have a grain of fat here, and then you have a grain of fat that comes down and around here. These two grains of fat will separate, and meat is supposed to come through there. Da-dunch. But that's the grain. And this is big for a first cut steak. And I'm not going at the exact angle that this guy told me to go at. So I am going to see if I can correct that as I cut. Again, about 3/4 of an inch. And then I just go as straight across as I can. And that's another one. So plenty of steaks there. I got a little thin down at the bottom here, but it doesn't matter. It's still a good cut here. And I am going to, because I want to be going this way, and I'm starting to turn this way. This is sometimes what makes cutting meat so hard. I'm actually coming in the way I said I wanted to, and I'm not supposed to. So I am going to cut a half steak here. And hey, you can do that because it's your cut. You can do whatever you want. I'm gonna cut a half steak, and maybe I'll put chili meat, make chili meat out of it. But here we go. This is starting to show. I'm gonna put this in my scrap pile here. All right. This is starting to show what I was talking about, where the fat caps, the fat grains are going to separate, and you're going to start getting meat in between there. So let's go. I'm going to cut a real thin down this end, and I'm going to get thicker down this end because I'm trying to straighten out the mistake I made. And that ought to do it. This is going to be an odd cut steak. It's so thick down one end and so thin down the other. But hey, I make mistakes too. So here we go. I'm at the right angle now. And I've got a couple of ugly thick steaks. So we are going to cut our next steak. About 3/4 of an inch. And this is it. You just go across like so, and you just keep cutting your steaks. It's not that difficult. Now when you start getting steaks this big, and by the way, I got 10 of those 1-inch cut pork chops out of my pork. I'll cover that after. When you start getting steaks this big, you can cut them in half. Which I'm going to do probably with these because they're huge. And always as you're moving down, you want to kind of scrunch it together like this, because otherwise when you're cutting through it, you'll have a very thick side and a very thin side, kind of like what I did here. This one's very thin, this one's very thick. So to prevent against that, you can actually shape this as you go. So if you kind of bundle it all together, kind of lean the top back like that, we got a nice steak here. I'm going to come back to probably about here. So I've got 4 more steaks to cut. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's going to be about 15 steaks because I'm cutting some of these in half. Otherwise there'd be 7 to 9. But this is just so wide across that there's no reason, I mean, unless I'm having guests. There's no way to have this big. Now I'm cutting them thicker purposefully. I mean, look at the size of that. That's a 2-pound steak. There's no reason to have a steak that big. Let me rephrase that. Unless you want it that big. But my wife and I aren't going to be able to eat something like that in one sitting. Like I said, we're on diets right now. So I'll cut that in half. They'll make nice 1-pound steaks. Everything will be perfect and fine. Everybody will be happy. All right, so then you just start again down this side.
Several steaks later.
Now I'm going to cut this chunk of meat off, and that's going to be chili meat. The beauty of this is there's a piece here that was the impetigo piece, and we're just going to trim that right off. Now, that'll be my waist plate. Keep in mind that even this is a huge steak. I mean, look at that. That is, 3 hands. That's more than you should probably be eating, which is why I'm going to cut a few of these in half. And I'll let you see me do that. But the grain of the meat is now changing, which means that I probably should have stayed in the direction I originally thought. And you'll get a feel for this as you go and you start doing these. You'll get a much better feel for what the steak is the grain is supposed to look like, what the steak is supposed to look like after you trim it. And like I said, this is the very first time that I've ever cut anything of this magnitude. I'm gonna try one more. And the grain of the meat is definitely starting to change here. So that tells me that we're getting to the end of our run. And I'm kind of trimming the fat and some of the other stuff as I go here. And I'm going to take off another impetigo piece that is right here. For me, it's just easier to do at the end. And see how this is starting to separate? It doesn't normally do that when I'm cutting, and we have gotten to a point where I think I'm not going to be able to get any more steaks out of it. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and if I cut those in half, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, yeah, it's going to be about 15 steaks. And if this cut doesn't work out right here, it's all right because it's a chili cut. I'll just go to chili meat. Yeah, see, we've moved into another area here of the steak cap, and you can tell just by looking at it, and I'll come show you the difference in the grain of the meat. I don't know if you'll be able to tell. See how this is getting stringy, and this is good, and this piece that is the right piece is getting smaller, but this grainy piece over here is very thin. That's what we're trying to avoid. So now we've got a crap ton of chili meat here, but if you wanted to do a roast, this is your roast in here. You're gonna have to do some trimming to get to it, and this top piece definitely needs to come off. But you can see this is all starting to separate now. All right, you have that grained piece of meat, which, by the by, is super tender. But not good for roast or steak. And I'm just putting my hand in the meat and feeling for the veins here. Not veins, but the veins of fat and the separation. And then I'm cutting along those areas of separation. And I'm not going to get it perfect, but I'm going to get it close. Now here's the thing with this. That long grained slice will be excellent chili meat. But you can see how you can get a roast out of this too. I'm not going to use this for a roast. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple different things that you can do with this stuff. And I think the meat's in the way. So let me move it. I'm talking to you about all this different stuff that I'm doing, and I'm not sure you can see it. So here we are. Let me spin this back this way. You have the last of the meat. This is all going to be chili because it's really not good for much else. And there's a roast in here. If you want to trim away all this fat, you are more than welcome to. But I am going to do something different. I'm going to cut right down the middle here, and then that'll show you the points of separation. All right? Like I said, there's a roast in there, and that's your roast. You want to trim all of this off if you want the roast. And it's a pretty decent size roast on this side as well. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I am going to, and I cut it a little less than in half, a little more than a third. I am going to trim all of this off as if I were going to have a roast. And this is going to be chili meat. I'll trim the fat around that. I'll show you that too. But I am going to go ahead and trim this puppy down and get all the fat off over there. Waste chili. You can also cut steak tips out of this, which would be really just chop it down, cut this with the grain that is real long, so we were going against the grain there, is what they call it. This makes excellent steak tips. Just absolutely wonderful. All right, let's trim a little more of this fat, just because. So I've got me a nice little chunk of meat here. Let me get this off too. And I'll show you what I'm doing here in a second. I don't want any grains of fat in this if I can help it. Alright, I've got me this little chunk of meat here. Okay? Let me remove that. And it's small, but it doesn't need to be big. I'm going to flatten out the face here, which is what I do when I'm cutting steaks too. And you're going to need a real sharp knife for this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some very thin pieces here. And you're going to have to keep repositioning this in order to keep the pieces thin and go in the full length down. Alright, there's two. There's a third. And if you get any fat on this piece, just trim it as you go. Meaning, as you pull the pieces off, if you have just veins of fat is what you're looking for. Grains of fat, veins of fat. I'm interchanging these words and they're not supposed to be interchanged, so I don't need the emails, I know. Here's another one, and another one, and another one. I may need to take just a little more off of the other side. Alright. And then the rest of this can be chili meat. Alright, so there's one stack of meat here. Alright, I'm going to put that over there. And I am going to try to get at this piece in here, which is the other piece to the meat I was just cutting. And you'll be able to see, because this will be basically the roast that you're cutting this off of. And that's about right. That's about enough right there. What I did was I cut some real thin pieces of meat, and I probably could have gotten thinner, but You take them and you cut them. They're just little thin pieces of meat, medallions. And I'll take these and we'll toss them into a pan. If you want more, you can certainly cut a lot more than this. But we'll take these and we'll toss them in a pan with some peppers and onions and mushrooms, and we'll make a couple of nice steak sandwiches out of this. So those go over there. Now, I have more chili meat here, obviously. I've got chili meat over here. I've got my steaks here. And some of them were really, really big. So we are going to take them, and like I said, very simply, because this is bigger on this back end right here, and thinner down this end. So you want to go more than halfway here. And just cut them in half. Now I got this big, thick steak that probably only weighs about a pound, a couple of them. Nice. And now they can be vacuum sealed separately, cooked on different days. This one's absolutely huge. They can be cooked on different days, and you don't have a whole ton of leftovers in the refrigerator. I keep picking up that paper towel. I don't know if you noticed. I'm going to leave that one over there. I'm going to put this one here. I'm going to take this one. And I don't even really need to cut that one in half because it's already split. But I'm going to do it with this one too. Couple of nice steaks. This one is already cut in half for me. I just have to follow the lines. And we got one here. And we've got a nice stab of meat right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 steaks. Averaging anywhere from a pound to a pound and a half. There's a couple, this one right here is probably 2 pounds. So I'm going to keep it like that in case we have guests and stuff. Different size steaks for the different things you do. This can be one night. This can be one night. That might be a night. But this, you know, we'll do this one when we have guests. And we want to do steak. And then that is a half of one there. And this one, I'm going to leave this one intact too. I like the way it looks. So 16 steaks, 2 steak sandwiches, and this will take a while. But this is chili meat. And when I cut the chili meat on this, and I'm going to start with one of the bottom steak things here. All you do is you trim all the fat that you can off of it. So, yeah, I don't think you can see me with all this in the way. Take this out, take this out. All you do is you trim most of the fat off of this. Now remember, it's chili meat, it can have fat in it. You just don't want the real thick fat on the outside. So you come through, you give it a little cut, get all the fat off, goes on your scrap plate. Now I didn't get it all off, there's still some here, and I'm neurotic about this, so I'm gonna go back and see if I can get just a little more of it off. And with a nice sharp knife, it's a lot easier. But see, there's nothing intimidating at all about doing this. Once you get in and you start cutting, you can kind of go with the flow. And I'm going to give something to the dogs. You're going to hear mass scramble for these 2 tiny little pieces of meat. Once you get a feel for going through these, it becomes super easy. On the fly, I was changing directions with this because I needed to. The grain wasn't going quite the way. The guy that told me how to cut it the way that he would cut it at the place was wrong. The way I was going to do it is right. It should have gone at more of a straight angle rather than that angle he had me on. The way I was going originally was perfect, but then when I adjusted was when things kind of went. But I wanted to show you the adjustment anyway, that it's okay to cut half a steak, because if you are doing it and you realize that the grain in the meat isn't quite right, you can change directions. Just take a couple of half steaks and you've changed directions. Chili meat. Chili meat should be cut in 1/2 inch to 1 inch chunks. They don't have to be square. That's it. And you want them all to be about the same size. And I'll come show you in a second. But this is it. This is my chili meat. They're not very big. Just little cubes of meat. That's it. And I will go through this whole plate and pull as much of it off as I can. You're probably looking at about 4 pounds there, I would think. Because a chunk of about 1/3 of it's going to be fat. There's probably 4 pounds of meat there. So you go through, and with these pieces, I just cut them in strips like this. And what I'm going to do too is, because this was that half piece that has that real sharp, comes down to a point, I'm just going to add that to my sandwich steaks. Simple, 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 guys. It's good stuff, man. Easy. And I'm still going to trim the roast for you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get all the way through this. Then I have to vacuum seal all of this. Again, 16 steaks. Just go to the grocery store and price out 16 steaks. I mean, once you get up to, if they're all 1 pound to 2 pounds, once you get up in the area of 10 steaks, it's already paid for itself. And like I said, you can take this piece here and make steak tips out of it. Now, what I do is I make steak tips sometimes out of this cut and other pieces, and then I vacuum seal it and freeze it. And then a month later, month and a half later, when I go down, because we have deep freezers downstairs, so that it's real cold in there. So if you can set your freezer really cold, this works better. We go back down, I pick up another steak cap, I cut some more steak tips, and as soon as I have 3 or 4 pounds of them, we cook them. Simple, simple, man. So out of one of these big steak caps, you can get first cut steaks, which we got. You can get chili meat, which we got. Steak sandwiches, which we got. Just tons and tons of steaks. Or instead of chili meat, you can get some chili meat and some steak tips. In which case, you would cut it the same way into these cubes or triangles, but they'd just be bigger. So you need bigger cuts of meat, and that wrong way grain piece from earlier is perfect for it. And you just cut this up, and now I don't have to go buy chuck or some crappy piece of meat to make my chili with, because even those crappy chuck steaks will cost you $10 now, the big thing, and there's still not enough. You need, to do my chili, you need 5-6 pounds of meat. So you're at that point, you're looking at $15 to $20 for chili meat. Take that off the top of this, because we're going to get about 4 pounds here, and I've already got 2 pounds downstairs from a previous steak cap. That's enough to make chili, and I've been dying to make my chili again because I'm out. So take that off the top, $20 right there. There's a $55 cut of meat. This little amount of steak for sandwiches. We were in the grocery store the other day, and because I hadn't done a steak cap in so long, my wife was going to buy a package of meat like that. They wanted $9 for it. For that. So take that off the top. Now you're at $46. Can you buy 6 steaks, let alone 16 of them, for $46? Maybe 6. but you get the point. You just take a little time and you cut your own. And this was that very first cut right there. So you take your time, a little bit of your own time, you cut your own, you pay for it out of the cryo pack, and you save. It would probably cost you a third to 50% more to buy all of this separately. It would be twice as expensive. For all of this, it might run you $120, $130 for the amount of meat that I got out of this. So keep that in mind when you're trying to decide if this is worth it or not. It definitely is. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish this up. There's going to be a lot of fat trimming here. But, you know, these were the chunks I cut off the side. They don't have to be perfect either. You just start. You can cut them in at different angles too. It doesn't have to be all square. Don't be a square, man. Don't be a square. But this is it, man. You were intimidated by my meat. And there was no need to be, because we went right through it. And we got our steaks. I'm going to be doing vacuum sealing. I've got my chili meat. We're good, man. We're good. So let me shut the camera down here. And I'll be back after I finish chopping all of this up, and I'll show you what I have just before I start vacuum sealing.
Tonight at 9 on Self-Discovery. Elderly ETs.
Is my hair spiky enough? I don't know. Does the scarf take away from my traps? I've been working out, and ETs like traps. I can't have them blocked.
It's fine.
Yeah?
Yeah, fine.
Are you sure?
Oh, I'm sure, Giorgio.
Okay.
Cut!
The color of my shirt is gray. E.T. was gray. Coincidence?
Cut!
We were spliced from DNA that came from aliens. We get old. Is it possible they get old? You bet.
Cut!
It's kinda hot in here.
Please stick to the script.
What about my hair? Is it still spiky enough?
Yes, Giorgio.
What the hell is that?
Cut!
Sounds like something Greek.
Cut!
Well, if I'm being honest, I don't even know how to pronounce my last name. Anybody's guess?
Okay, cut!
Tasuku Tisusa. Better cut that out of the show. Is that what I look like? I knew I should have tanned before this.
Giorgio, please. The script.
On December 21st, come meet me in Las Vegas. We're having a show. You'd think we would have done this on the 20th, seeing how the world could end on the 21st at 1 o'clock in the morning. Somebody didn't think this through.
Cut!
Elderly ETs on Self-Discovery.
Giorgio, no.
I just feel like my hair could be spikier. I'll kick those alien asses. Don't even worry about it.
Cut! It's just a promo. Do it right.
I know it's a promo. Elderly aliens on Self-Discovery. December 21st. Join me for the end of the world. I'm Giorgio Tasuku. I'm going to keep getting held up on that. December 21st. Join me, Giorgio. I almost tried to pronounce my last name again.
Cut!
Somebody bring me an iced tea? Maybe a hookah?
No hookers.
No, not a hooker. A hookah. You know.
Oh, cut!
Join me, Giorgio, on Self-Discovery, December 21st, for elderly ETs.
Oh, thank God.
Got it.
That's a wrap. Oh crap, here he comes again.
I warned you, We're all gonna die!
He's doing it again. Somebody shoot him with the tranquilizer gun.
I'm back. It took about 40 minutes. This is my plate of scrap. This is just fat and stuff I couldn't cut off. This is my chili meat. It's just shy of 4 pounds. So that's a lot of meat there. And anything that was too thin or stringy to throw into chili is very simply, I cut it off and give it to the dogs. And they love it. Obviously, you can hear them. And that's it. So I weighed some of these steaks too. Some of my half steaks are very close to 2 pounds. I cut them so thick. And a couple of my full steaks are nearly 3 pounds. So this is just a ton of meat out of one steak cap, basically. You're looking at most of it. I'll get rid of this because we don't need this anymore. And if I wanted to, if times were really lean, I probably would have spent the extra time, because there's probably about another 1/4 to 1/2 pound of meat still in there. I just didn't feel like digging for it today. I have a whole bunch of meat for the dogs, but I have to vacuum seal my 16 steaks. I might keep one out for dinner tonight. I gotta vacuum seal my chili meat. I got 2 pounds downstairs. I'm making chili this weekend. Woo! And I have my steaks, sandwich steaks. So that we'll probably do next week sometime. So I'll vacuum seal that too. But that's all of that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run down and get my vacuum sealer, and I am going to vacuum seal all of this, and I'll come back and we'll start on the roast. Very easy, very simple. Anybody can do this. You can hack it up, you can make mistakes, you can make super thick, super thin steaks, and you know, who cares? It's yours. But I went through and I cut that whole 25-pound cap up, about 4 pounds of chili meat, and I don't even know how much in steak. I'll have to weigh it, but there's still some fat on that steak too. But there you have it. Yeah, it's so simple to butcher your own stuff. You may as well do it, because you save a ton of money by buying it like this, and I'm not sure why, but you do. So there you have it. I'm gonna go put my stuff away and then vacuum seal everything, and I'll be back. All right, last one, roast. I picked a big one. This is like an 8-pound roast. New gloves. You know you want me not to wear them. I have to. I have cuts on my hands. I told you already. This is gonna be simple. This isn't this isn't gonna be. It's not gonna be like the roast show, because I'm not gonna cook this and prep it for cooking or anything like that. I'm just going to trim the fat off this. I did a show about cooking roasts, and I never trimmed the fat in front of everybody, and I've gotten several emails back asking me if I could just run through it once. Obviously these people admitted they know how to trim fat, but they wanted to see me do it because they think I'm sexy. No, because sometimes you just want to know where to start. So this is just a regular roast, but bigger. It's 8 pounds. And I'm probably still only going to half this, because like I said, we're dieting here. So I'm eating a lot more meat, and this is one of those things. Now, I have some impetigo on this, so this will be cut off. You don't want to keep it on a roast. And I trimmed most of it off the steak cap too, just when the steaks were cut, and the camera, after I turned off the camera, as I was vacuum sealing them, I just went through and snipped them off. I didn't clean the cutting board, and my countertop looks like Hannibal Lecter lives here, but I'll clean all this after I do this. We're just going to trim the fat. Something that you wish the people in Washington would do. But they don't have my skills. So I like to do it this way. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm so used to doing it, I just start. You have a big end and a small end. I usually start with the fat cap, this part right here. And I start down at the thin end because it comes down to a point and you can usually grab it and get a sharp knife underneath it like that, which I did before. You saw me do it. And then you just start peeling it back and cutting it where you can. Now, you're going to get some of the meat. You're going to trim some of it off. The goal here is to take as little as possible. Sometimes I do this, none comes off. Sometimes I do it and large chunks of meat come out. And then I just trim them off the fat and feed them to the dogs. Because they need meat too. But I like to pull on the fat and just kind of run the knife as well. And it's a sharp knife. It's a sharp knife. So it goes fairly decent. And like I said, it's going to come off in chunks and pieces. I try to get as much of it as I can on this first pass. And you're going to leave a whole bunch of silver skin behind. But that's okay. My puppy's barking because apparently people aren't allowed to drive past the house. So I just kind of go through. You'll see there's a huge chunk left behind here. So we're just going to keep moving on down that road. I'm pulling my fat. See, I took some meat right there. But I'm kind of sliding the knife up as I do it in the hopes that as I get towards the end, I take less than what's there. But there's enough there that I'm going to take some of that off for the pups. But you don't get it now, Mr. Barky. We'll set that aside. Fat. Don't do that. I told you before. And then I just proceed to go down and go back and use a very sharp knife, and I try to take as much of it off as I can. And you're not going to get it all. If you saw the roast program I did, you saw that there was still little bits of fat sometimes on it. This is the impetigo, so I'm just going to cut that whole section right off. So it's not, as to not contaminate the rest of it. The dogs don't get the impetigo meat. They could probably handle it, but I just don't feel right about giving it to them. Because I care about them. Even when they're barking at phantom cars. And farting. And snoring louder than anybody in the world. Rottweilers snore. Ooh. So we survived. Now this is deceiving, this piece here. You see that there's meat here, okay? It's not really part of your roast. And it looks like a lot of meat. I cut that off for the dogs because there's a big thing of fat underneath here, in between the meat and the meat. You want to get the meat off the fat, and you only want meat that touches meat, not fat. So what we have here on the underside, and this is the reason I chose this roast, is a lot of what's called silver skin. It's impossible to get off. I'm going to take an attempt at it. You can get it off, but you usually end up taking a chunk of meat with it. You almost need a razor blade to get that off without getting any meat with it. But, I mean, you can see, this is just as I go here. I cut this out of the original program because I didn't think anybody wanted to sit here and listen to me babble for 5 minutes while I trim all these little tiny pieces of fat off. But what I didn't realize is that if somebody's never done it before, this is invaluable. Because this is not, you know, you've heard me say this before, if I can speak, because apparently I'm starting sentences and not continuing with them. You've heard me say before that I'm not a chef. I haven't gotten any real training. I was a baker in another life for a little while. But in trying to prep this stuff at home, the most important thing is knowing where to begin, knowing what to do, being familiar with the process. So I should have left the camera on at that time, because that was a quick episode. I actually artificially extended it because it was so quick. But if you don't know and you're not familiar with the process, and I just had a whole bunch of issues trying to say familiarity, which I can't still say for some reason, that'll make the blooper reel. Then it's hard to do. It's hard to even get started, because there's something here that you've not done before, and I should have thought ahead, and I should have said, hey, I'm gonna do this, and it's gonna be boring for some people, but my whole show is about the process and about showing you things that maybe you haven't done before, maybe you have, showing you the way that I do it, which sometimes isn't the correct way, but it works for me, and getting you familiar with doing things that a lot of people think they can't do for some reason. They leave it to, the experts, and some of these experts are not as good as you. So don't be afraid to do it. Like, I took a nice chunk off right there. So I'm gonna cut that back. That whole chunk of meat came off. I've done roasts before, and so has my wife, by the way, because she's pretty familiar with how to do this. And when we finished, it looked like somebody went down it like a corn, eating a cob of corn, and took chunks and bites out of it. Because sometimes you can't get close enough to get the silver skin and the fat off without gouging into the meat. So like that. But the sharper your knife is, the better chance you have at this. Be forgiving. Don't worry if you take a nice chunk of meat off while you're doing it, because no one's going to see it except you. If you're having guests over, then you can always flip it over and whatnot. But keep in mind too, once you get it down to about this, where there are no big huge chunks anymore, it's all just silver skin and little bits of fat, that's fine. Because at 500 degrees, 475 actually, a lot of this will melt right off. It's going to end up in the bottom of the pan, au jus style. So you can leave a fair amount of fat on it. You just don't want the big chunks, because it doesn't taste good. I don't know any bite into it. Some people like it. Some people leave the fat on and eat it. I think my father used to do that. He liked the fat. He used to eat the fat off the steak. I mean, he was skinny and we were poor, so I mean that probably had something to do with it. But anyway, that's it. That's all the fat that I took off it. And you know what? I would probably, and I probably will, go through and just trim little pieces off here and there if I can grab them like that. But you could literally spend all day. I threw that in for my friend Brian D. You could literally spend all day. I want to see if you're watching. Cutting the fat off of this, and taking chunk after chunk after chunk after meat. But at some point, just say it's good enough. You're not going to serve this to the dude from the Crazy Kitchen show there that likes to yell at everybody and breathe really loud and throw around. The guy with the blonde hair, I can't remember his name. I think it's Hell's Kitchen or something he's on. He freaks all out and says, that doesn't look perfect. And kicks somebody's cat and punches somebody's dog and runs through and throws up all over everybody. That ain't this. This is for your family. If they don't like it, they can go to their room hungry. But that's it. I just trim it down as much as I can like that. Try not to take too many chunks out of the meat. And then, as you know, just cut her in half. She's ready to go. So, that's that. The family's coming home, so it's gonna get loud in here, so I have to turn my camera off. Our time together is over for today, but it's okay, kids. Uncle Andy will be back tomorrow. So, butcher your own stuff. You save money. You get everything the way that you want it. Look at the steaks. Look how many steaks I got. I got chili meat. I got all kinds of stuff out of that. And I could have gotten other things if I wanted to. A roast. I could have gotten steak tips. The 1-inch plus pork chops that I cut. And then I cut them down the middle to be stuffed. If you don't want to stuff them, cut them 1/2 inch. You'll get 20 of them. And then you have 2 roasts. How are you going to get that for less than $20? Because one of those things costs anywhere from $14 to $18. Sometimes they're 21 if they're big, like the one I have downstairs. But how are you going to get 20 pork chops and 2 roasts for $20, even if it's pork? There he goes. The family's home. And these roasts, I buy them by the case. I bought a case of them. It was 140 something pounds, 149 pounds of roast for under $220. I'm sorry, $225 I think is what I paid for it. So you're making a choice to go out and get these things by the case, or even if you just buy one and you want to trim it up like that. But if you buy it by the case, it's much cheaper. And that big steak cap, they're not always that big. Sometimes they're about half that size, and they're just for steaks and chili meat. There's no first cut, there's no roast meat. They cut the first cuts and the roast off it, and that's what you're left with. They cryo seal that at the slaughterhouse, and they send it off to places like the warehouses. I just got lucky and came across that one and wanted it because I had never cut a steak cap that complete and that big. 25 pounds. Family's home. So, all right. Don't be afraid to cut your own meat. Don't be afraid of mine. So, that's it, man. Go cut some stuff up. Don't be intimidated. Listen, don't be intimidated by the size of my meat. This, if you... I can't put that in. Don't be intimidated by the size of the meat cap here. All right? It's a lot of meat, I know. I can't say this. Okay, this is a big cut of meat, all right? Don't... Oh, I gotta stop doing this, come on. All right, here we go. Whoo, I need a sip of water. There's no way to say this. All right.